Excellent. All right. So before we bring up our speakers, just tell you how the evening works. So we have two speakers. The motion is vibe coding is democratizing software, but lowering engineering standards. So we have Tom. If you want to come up, Tom, sit underneath your photo. Tom will talk for about 10 minutes, arguing for the motion. And we've got Matt, if you want to come up, Matt, arguing against the motion. Now, it just so happens that Tom's got a t-shirt special. No, it just so happens that Tom and Matt are co-founders of the same business. So we thought, what an event. You can sit down. You have to stand up. A posture.
We're doing my own facing off.
Yeah. You pop your little mic on. That's great. And so the way it works, 10 minutes for, 10 minutes against, go into audience Q&A, and then about a minute and a half each wrapping up. So we're here for, 40 minutes, really. It really works with audience participation, so get your questions ready over those talks, because I don't want to be talking for very long. I want you to be quizzing these great minds on this topic. But before we hand the mics over, we'd like you, there's going to be some voting as well, right? So we'll take a vote before the debate, and then the debate, and then we take a vote at the end to see if they've moved your needle, so to speak. So, wrong way. So if everyone could get their phones out and scan the QR code.
No, I think we're exempt.
People have started voting. Oh. 25 votes so far, so we're still waiting for a few more.
Should I just leave? After a really bad job like that.
You make that.
Can only hope.
I mean, you have set them up for a fall, haven't you? Yeah. I mean, if it's dead heat, they have promised an arm wrestle.
Have we?
Anyone not voted? Oh, there we go. 2/3, 1/3. Right. Let's get this switched back. Then stop button. Here we go. Right, Tom Stockton. Quick introduction and then into your 10 minutes. And you can stand.
I'll start sitting. I'll start by sitting, actually. Thanks, Amal, and thanks for hosting. I'm Tom Stockton. I'm co-founder and CEO of Cluzy Labs with Matt. We're a machine learning consultancy in Manchester. We've been going for 6 years. Matt and I started the company 6 years ago. We had no idea what we were doing. Set up from day one, literally said, WTF are we doing? And today we have a pretty thriving business. With some really good people working here, and now we're having this chat. So, yes, that's me. I thought before we get into the motion, I thought I'd start off by setting the scene a little bit, because I think it's really fascinating that 12 months ago we wouldn't be having this debate about vibe coding. ChatGPT came out in November 22, and I think one of the novel things about it was it could write code, but it was a bit of a toy thing. I don't think anybody thought at the time that it would replace humans or could do what human programs were doing. But then since then, the models have got better and better. And one of the things they've measured model performance on is how well they can code against the standard benchmarks. So we know they've got better and better. And last year, things really started going up a notch with Replit, Lovable, Cursor, and Windsurf really getting some momentum. Because two reasons. One, the models have got to a point of really good capability. But secondly, agentic AI started to become a thing. So the AI went from becoming a thing that could perceive and reason to becoming something that could perceive, reason, and act. And those actions became things like commit to GitHub, check the files on your system, run some, deploy to the cloud, put things into a database. So that's, I think, started that wave of vibe coding. But in this year, the term vibe coding was coined by guy called Andrej Karpathy that you may or may not have heard of, who's a very famous AI researcher, one of the founders of OpenAI. Is that right? It is a Google, Wikipedia it before, yes.
He was also...
It's a big name. I was like, why is he a big name? He co-founded OpenAI and was director of AI at Tesla. So Karpathy knows his shit. And he did a tweet in February. I'm going to read it out. I'm going to paraphrase bits of it. So Karpathy says, there's a new kind of coding I call vibe coding, where you fully give into the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that code even exists. It's possible because the LLMs are getting too good. I ask the dumbest things like, decrease the padding on the sidebar by half because I'm too lazy to find it. I accept all always. I don't read the diffs anymore. When I get error messages, I just copy paste them in with no comment. Usually that fixes it. The code grows beyond my usual comprehension. I'd have to really read through it for a while. Sometimes the LLMs can't fix a bug, so I just work around it or ask for random changes until it goes away. It's not too bad for throwaway weekend projects, but still quite amusing. It's not really coding. I just see stuff, say stuff, run stuff, and copy paste stuff, and it mostly works. So to me, that really encapsulates the whole thing, and I think also the main point of the motion. That was in February this year. And also in February this year, Claude Code was released, which to me was a real shift in sort of vibe coding. I really got into it, and a lot of other people have as well. And I think then there's been a huge rush in what AI-assisted coding or vibe coding tools can do. So that's the background. Am I using the mic correctly? Yeah. The motion. So I'm up against Matt, who's A, very clever, and B, a great public speaker. This is his third talk of the day. So I need to be absolutely on point here to win, although it looks like I'm already in a good position. So the motion to me splits in two halves. You've got the first half, which is vibe coding is democratizing software, which I think is irrefutable. I don't think he's going to argue this, but we'll see. And I've got evidence to prove it. And then but I think the real debate to me is in the second half of around the engineering standards. I think that'll be a good debate. But again, somebody might say it's not democratizing software. So my case for the point of vibe coding and democratizing software. So I've got three examples. And the real examples, I don't think it's just conjecture off the internet. First one is from somebody we know, Amal, our friend Amy Wild, who is very experienced executive sales and marketing. She was CCO at North Coders. She ran a marketing boot camp at Phyllis Adventures. And she had an idea for a platform that was to provide perimenopause support for women. So it's a really, really important thing. Affects half the population. Most of us know nothing about it. And Amy wanted to build a platform and validate the idea. Now, she thought it would cost her about 50 grand to build this thing. She might have invested that, but instead, she's lovable. And then a bit of Claude Code to build this thing, which has then now proved the point. And now she's at the point where she's going to go to market to get investment to actually push it on. The second example, it's a bit less worthy, but it's quite amusing. So one of our people that work for us, Max, who's our community manager, Max does a fancy football thing with his mates, and the losers have to pay for Chinese for the winner every year. We did an internal hackathon at Fuzzy Labs using a lot of these vibe code and AI assisted tools. We built some amazing stuff in one day, but Max saw the potential and saw how accessible it was. And in a weekend, he built himself a fantasy football predictor. Does it work? I've no idea. We'll find out next June if he's got to buy another lobster chow mein. And then the final example to prove vibe coding is democratizing software is me. So I'm a pretty average Python programmer, or was, not been on the tools for years. And after we got into AI agents earlier this year, and it looks like a really interesting thing. And I had an idea. I wanted to build an agentic connector to our CRM, our customer relationship management system. And we use a thing called Capsule, which is a Manchester-based company. It's a really good piece of software. So I vibe coded this thing over the weekend, and it blew me away. I was like, I can't believe I could not have built this on my own. It would have taken me weeks, and I did it over a weekend. Came back on the Monday, showed the team. I actually showed it to Matt. I said, "What do you think of the code?" And he went, "It's all right, that. A few too many comments, but it's all right." Stony faced. So that was one of the things I was able to do. So that's my case for vibe coding is democratizing software. You happy with that? Yeah.
But let's find out.
Well, we will find out. Right, the second half. So I think lowering engineering standards. I think in principle, to know if something's a standard or not, you need to know something about it. So if you don't know how good code is, how can you know if it's any good or not? And I think the general principle of vibe coding is you don't know, you're not looking at code, you're not reading the code, you don't understand the code. So how do you know if it's any good? So that's the broad principle. But coming back to my other 3 examples, so I've been chatting with Amy this week just to get her approval that I could talk about this, because she might not have wanted me to, but she was up for it. And I said, how was it? Was it any good? And she knows it's not production ready. She's used the money she's going to raise now is to actually get a developer in, as per our conversation earlier, Amal, to actually take it to production and make it something that's real. But she said, it's a pile of horseshit. I've spent weeks trying to clear tech debt. It's drifted off in all sorts of directions, so I'm tidying it up so I can give it to my developer to make some sense of. I think that says a lot about it. And that was also my experience as well. I don't know how good Max's fancy football predictor was. Find out next June. But my own experience, the agentic connector I built, I got so excited after I built it. I was like, let's do more. So I did the CRM thing. I thought, right, let's connect to our HR system and let's connect to our time tracking systems. We can get all these operational reports out of it. I thought, brilliant. So I gave Claude the example of what I'd already built as a template. I gave it the API documentation for the other 2 things. I said, build me the same thing for those. He built one in Python, which was the original source. We built one in TypeScript. I was like, I didn't ask for that, didn't I? So it was like I was testing it out to check I was actually reading the code, which I wasn't. So that was that example. And the other one that I think, coming back to the point about not knowing what you're evaluating, I built another internal app that we use to sort of manage our knowledge about our customers and people in our community. And I wanted to deploy it to the cloud. Now I know a bit about deploying to the cloud. That was my career. I was a DevOps engineer, cloud DevOps engineer, so I know what good looks like. And I said to it, write me the infrastructure as code, write me the Terraform, deploy it to the cloud. It did a terrible job. It wrote me this one file that was really brittle. If I'd made any changes wrong, it would delete my database. So if I hadn't known what good looked like, this would have gone into production and caused me a lot of issues. So that really cemented the lowering engineering standards. So them are 3 examples. But the last point I want to make, which I think is a bigger point, and we've been talking about this before, is I think if we just assume that AI can write code, then it's going to discourage anybody from learning to write code. And if we do that, we're in a lot of trouble. Because at the moment, there's a bit of a hypothesis that we don't need junior engineers, we just need senior engineers to manage the AI and get shit done. But if that happens and no one learns to code, what happens when the senior engineers finish their careers? We're going to end up with AI on AI, and that doesn't sound good to me. So keep learning to code.
Okay. But yeah, handing over to Matt, the case again.
Was that 9 minutes, was it? I've got to stick to 9 as well in that, right, for fairness. No.
Oh, you got an extra one.
I've got an extra 1 minute extra. No, I'm going to squander it, actually.
Count your introductions.
Okay, I see. Fair enough. Wonderful. Okay, well, I'll make my introduction. As Tom said, this is my 3rd talk of the day, so please forgive me if I'm a little bit drowsy. Was not planning to do 3 talks in one day, but that's just how it happened. My name is Matt. I'm the CTO and co-founder with Tom of Fuzzy Labs. I think that much you understand from Tom's introduction. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll flow into my argument. So really briefly, I am a nerd. I'm a programmer. How many people in the room would regard themselves as being a programmer out of interest? Excellent. That is a much higher proportion than what I get when I asked that question at Manchester Digital earlier. So good. Yeah, I mean, I'm a programmer. I've been programming for a very long time. My first computer was an Amiga 500. That's what I learned to code on in Amiga Basic. When we didn't have the internet, you had to type stuff in from books. I used to carry these books and the manuals on family holidays and study them. I was completely obsessed. But that's the background I come from. I'm an Emacs user. Any Emacs users? Oh, thank you. Good. Okay. I'm all right. I'm in good company. So anyway, yeah, that's my background. And so I'm the kind of profile for somebody who might strongly reject the idea of vibe coding. And then let me go into why I am against this motion. I wasn't looking behind myself to remind myself. I just wanted to remind myself of the motion. But yeah, like, why am I against this? And in what way am I against it? Because I'm not entirely against it, actually. I think Tom and I share some views on it, but also I would say I've got some different perspectives on it. So firstly, as Tom pointed out in his opening argument, vibe coding and more broadly AI-assisted coding tools are democratizing programming, but let's look at this a different way. They're democratizing the ability to create software, the ability to create things with computers. And the three examples Tom gave were wonderful. I particularly like the perimenopause app because we have somebody who knows of a problem, a human problem. She has experience, she has expertise, she can't program, but she has an idea that these tools allow her to express. And we've never been able to do that before. But there's also a bit of I think, a misplaced sense of novelty in these conversations. I don't know that Andrej Karpathy deliberately intended to suggest that this was novel, but I look back in the history of computer science and there's a thread of early thinking that became a dead end that I don't think should have. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with Logo. So Logo is this language, it comes with a robot, right? So the idea is you have a robot called the turtle, and Logo is a language that you use to tell the turtle what to do. So you can tell the turtle to move forward, backwards, pen up, pen down, and you can draw things. The intention of Logo is to teach children how to program. And the inventors of it, so there was Seymour Papert and there was Cynthia Solomon, who worked together to build this thing. It's all based on Papert's work in how technology can be used in education. So Papert was really passionate about how this new thing to him in the 1960s, programming, could be used to teach children, and how could it transform how we do teaching in the classroom. His thesis was that the children he was working with learn best when they are able to create things that they care about, and they're able to share them with other people. And that essence, that philosophy was kind of lost in later programming thinking, because now we have a world where programming languages are arcane and complicated, and any of us who build these things know it for a fact. Like, we're experts in it and we love it and we're obsessed with it, but also it's really complicated, and you end up with this specialism where only certain people can create things. What Seymour Papert and the people he worked with were advocating for was this world where anybody can use computers to create things, and programming languages, in his view, should support the creative urge. Now, he didn't have the technology that we have now, but I just want to kind of reflect on the fact that, yes, it's democratizing the ability to build software, but that's not a new idea in itself. It's more of a realization of a vision. And for me, I think that's a very good thing. But what does it change? Well, it changes who is building things, and it creates an entirely new situation to anything that we faced in the software industry in the past. So the question is, I think the point of contention then is, does this lower engineering standards? Are we at risk of being in a world where everybody's creating stuff and it's terrible, it's garbage, it's insecure, and none of it works, we can't debug it, and we're all very sad? Well, I don't think so, and there's a couple of reasons why I say that. Firstly, let's look at just that education question, because a lot of more junior engineers who I've spoken to have this concern, this deep-seated concern that if they use AI coding tools, they're going to forget how to code and they're going to lose their touch. I understand that, I sympathize with it, but I just don't think that's the case, because I think in order to take something from a prototype to real life, you actually do still need these skills. You need to be able to read code. You need to be able to debug it. Brian Kerningham, one of the inventors of C, famously said that debugging is twice as hard as programming. So don't write the cleverest code you can possibly write, because you're not clever enough to debug it. That still stands, right? It still applies. But I guess we're in a position now where if somebody like the example that Tom gave of Amy Wild can create something, someone who's not a programmer can create something, I don't think it reflects negatively on the tooling that she's in a position now to say, right, I need to raise money to get a real programmer to take this to the next level. Actually, that's a good thing, because the opportunity would never have existed if not for the tooling, if not for the capabilities. So of course there's still a role for software engineers. That's always going to be the case, but I think the focus for the software engineers becomes much more on debugging, on reading code, interpreting code, understanding requirements, building empathy with users, than it does in the mechanics of actually writing the code. But we still need these skills. And as I say, if someone's in a position where they've built something and they're like, right, I've built the thing, great, it works and it's got traction. Now I need someone who has the expertise to help me take that to the next level. That's not a bad thing. That doesn't say that we're lowering engineering standards. If anything, it reinforces that engineering standards are important and we know why they're important. But it also signals that we have opportunities and an economy growing that we simply wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's the way I see it. And I guess then that final point of what is important when it comes to the pragmatics of doing it, I think we do need to not lose our touch as engineers with how it works. We need to stay in the game. We need to understand how the code works, because otherwise engineering standards will lower. But of course, there are things we can do to prevent that. It doesn't have to be an inevitability, because we can guard against it through deliberate practice of these skills. And then, yeah, that final point about learning, I thought that the point you made at the end about learning really struck a chord, because I was thinking, well, actually, the experience of learning and the use of technology in learning was how I'm seeing the current capabilities in agentic AI. So I think that's a different perspective, I guess, that, and I think it's a worthy perspective that actually Gen AI, used correctly, can accelerate the learning process. And I don't think if I learned to code as a teenager, I think if I were learning to code today, I would still have the same level of curiosity and the same drive to learn how things really work under the hood. But I would probably use ChatGPT to help me understand it and give me better feedback. And that's all that's really changed. If anything, I'm glad that we are realizing Seymour Pappert's vision, and that's my argument.
Come in at exactly 9 minutes. There we go. Well done, boys. That was very fascinating. I've got questions, but this is where's the thing gone? This is the audience Q&A session. So it's not for me to do anything other than run down the room and pass the mic around. We're going to start with Ian.
Thank you both. That was great. I sort of felt maybe we were redefining vibe coding a little bit, as in don't read the diffs. I don't know how I learned from that. But my question is, I'm looking out opposite and there's Bupa over there, and I was thinking about democratizing skills. So, should we democratize heart surgery? So the man, just anybody could do heart surgery. And if we did, should we accept some lowering of our engineering standards when it comes to heart surgery? Or are there certain elements, whether that's in software or other professions, where we just need to say, hey, we need human experts here. We need them involved. And they need to be looking at and making the decisions about these critical applications where appropriate.
Should I take that first? Okay. I reject the comparison. While I understand the spirit of the question, I reject the comparison is because obviously we should not democratize heart surgery. Like that just feels absurd. I don't think that it's analogous to say democratizing software is like democratizing heart surgery, because software is essentially the space of every possible thing you could feasibly do on a computer. And that's a lot of different things, from programming a turtle to draw a star, to building a game, to building a prototype for something you want to raise funding for, all the way through to building a pacemaker, to bring it back to your point. Yeah, we probably shouldn't vibe code a pacemaker, and we'll always have the experts to do that. But I don't think it subtracts from anything to say that now more people can create things. I don't think that subtracts engineering standards from scenarios where we really, really care about it, if you see what I mean. That's my view on it. I don't know, Tom.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah. He said it much better than I would.
Dave.
So
I thought it was quite interesting, the argument around the opportunity. So I do think it is creating opportunity for people. But I think one of the potential issues with this is the idea of creating a business and gaining traction to gain funding. Now, often that involves getting a certain number of users. And so, for example, a perimenopause app might involve tracking health data. And if you then took your Terraform file, which deploys a public database on a public IP with a front-end application with a connection string built in, which has happened with, there's a T app in America that then exposed a bunch of women's identity data. It sounds to me like that is a real lowering of engineering standards and a potential problem. Because on the flip side of this, once you've got that developer in, how many businesses run with legacy platforms and legacy databases and legacy software for years and years and years? And how long would it take you to get rid of those security problems? And this just sounds like a lowering of engineering standards from the very beginning, in a way that, like plain text passwords used to be probably one of our biggest concerns at the beginning, let alone a wide open database to 4chan.
And SQL injections and all this stuff, yes.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think in Amy's case, I don't think she pretends this is going to go anywhere near production or any real users. It's purely to validate that this is something that people would want. So she's shown it to her doctor. She's tried it herself. I don't think it's got any personal data on it, by the way, but it's she's under no illusion that this is...
This person, by the way, was definitely endangering people's health. Yeah, I guess my point is, there are people out there who would go and deploy something like that to production, put it in Play Store, and start selling.
Yeah, and I agree, that is a big risk, and I think that's why discussions like this are really important, to educate people of the reality of it. And coming back to the point is...
We talked about this earlier on, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I've got a friend whose job it is to verify going for funding, works with startups or works with the funder to go, actually, how can I verify the quality of the code? I think maybe that job then goes up with the onset of people using the vibe coding or the AI box to create something that they're trying to make a business out of. That's exactly the conversation.
We've got to be very wary at the moment, but I think we've also got to be aware of the reality that we're really early on the journey of AI and LLMs, so they're only going to get better and better. So at the moment, they are pretty shit at operational stuff. Like their Terraform is awful. And I was chatting with someone at lunch, and like the hypothesis was because there's not that much. They're good at the moment because they've been training lots of public, not trained on GitHub. There's lots of great code out there they can train on, but there's not that much operational stuff to train on. But that's not hard to fix. So that is going to improve, but I still agree. Like we've got to monitor it, and there's got to be benchmarks, but knowing how good they are. But ultimately, I still think you need a human.
Matt, do you want to add anything?
I'll add one or two thoughts. I suppose, like I can absolutely sympathize with your argument. It's actually hard to argue against that, and we have a factual case of the T app where people's data has been leaked because someone had far too much confidence, unjustified confidence in what they had built and no expertise to be able to know better. That is the situation we're in, is that the cat's out of the bag in this respect, because people can do this now. Like regardless of whether we think they ought to or not, they can. But that doesn't necessarily, it creates more risk of lowered engineering standards, I suppose. But it doesn't mean that lowered engineering standards are inevitable, because I think we can, as an industry, change our assumptions about who is writing code, who is producing software in the first place. And therefore, perhaps as engineers, it's our obligation to work with people like that to help them, for example. But I suppose it's not an inevitability, I suppose, is my argument, but I can't argue very strongly against the notion that there is obviously more opportunity for people to deploy stuff that's not secure. Like, that's clearly the case. Yeah.
Well, can I move over to Liam?
Thanks. So prototypes going into production has been a problem everywhere I've ever worked and everyone I've ever talked to. And the engineers say, like, they've done the right thing. It's not scalable. It's not polished. We didn't understand the things. Don't use it in production. And you get overruled. So this exact thing has been happening for as long as I've been in the industry. Is this different? I may be missing something. It feels very similar, but there might be something different now.
No such thing as a prototype. I'm going to hand it to Tom for his thoughts.
I think it, like I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if we've invested in a human to create a prototype, then we want to get maximum value out. We want to take it to production. I think it is different because there's not the capital investment in building the prototype now. So in Amy's case, she was like 50 grand. No, a few £100 and some weekends and pain to figure out how to use Lovable, and she's done it. So it's much easier to throw it away. I think now is the difference. Sorry.
It's about volume. We see more prototypes going into production.
Do I think we will see more prototype construction? Yeah, we probably will. Yeah.
Maybe also, if I pull out a couple of common themes here, maybe there's a case to be made for the tooling itself to be better at not producing vulnerable code. I know that's very hard in itself, but we can do better. We can never get to perfect, but we shouldn't let a lack of perfection be the enemy of better. So, like, should Claude Code be trained to be better at not leading not unsophisticated, but untrained users down the wrong path? There's a role there as well, I think.
But to take that thread one further, right? Just in the world of the economics a bit. So let's say you're a founder, you've built this thing using vibe coding. It's brittle, to use your word, Tom, and you get funded. But part of that funding is to obviously check that the technical side is not brittle, that it can withstand, but also to further take it to market. And as a founder, as all three of us still are, I guess, in that respect, you have to make commercial decisions. Like, actually, I need to get to market. I need to get enough users to actually then get the next pound of funding, or to actually start getting some traction and some sales in. They might go, well, actually, there's a financial reality of me going, well, actually, you know what? It works enough. I'll underspend on that and I'll overspend on marketing just so I can get to my next check or get to my next sale. Does those lowering of engineering standards mean the financial realities of running a business mean that stuff will get missed?
I think it's more likely to happen, but I think it depends on the individual. I think as technical co-founders, like, we care a lot about the engineering of it, but there's still a pragmatic choice. But if you're going to cause harm to somebody else, or you're going to create security risks, it's a balance. If it's like, we think it's we know it's brittle and it'll fall over, and if we get this amount of users, then it causes a problem, but we don't care because we need to get to that amount of users first. That's one choice. But if it's leaking data or it's going to cause some harm, that's a different discussion, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that seems reasonable. Again, I wonder what the tooling that we use can do to better guard against this stuff rather than making it the response. Because if we're going to advocate, if I'm, for instance, going to advocate for a world where other people, non-programmers, can create software, then I shouldn't expect them to know the risks of harm. I shouldn't expect them to have that responsibility. So to what degree can the tooling we're using mitigate that? To what degree can it prevent users being drawn down that path where harm is caused without them realizing? So that's one thought there. And again, we'll never make that perfect, but we can certainly make it better. I also wonder if generally users' attitudes towards sharing their data will change. I mean, you can hope, right? But, should you trust this random website with your data? We kind of default to yes, but if anyone can build a thing that collects your data, do you still trust them? maybe not. Maybe you shouldn't. Don't know if that'll change, but yes.
Cool. Got a question over here.
So many. I'll try to distill it down. And I mean, I think I've got two main points of. I think one, the idea about lowering engineering standards. I mean, I think there's so many software houses out there where the engineering level quality varies anyway. And people just make do with whatever developers that they've got. Some are bad, some are good. I think the idea that there's this high standard is a bit of a dream anyway. You know, it's just what you've got to work with. It's a business. I think, secondly, I think it's a bit in the phrasing of the question about vibe coding. I think most people who are in any way related to working with software know that software is not just code, and that, you know, there's UX people, UI design. I mean, I've spoken to plenty of data people here already. Data pipelines are not just a bit of code here. There's so much more to building software than just prototyping with vibe coding. That I think the idea that vibe coding is somehow going to do away with all the good is a bit bonkers. You know, and I mean, even at the recent like hierarchical reasoning models that came out, they were showing that the LLMs themselves are not necessarily going to be the future. It's going to change, and this is just one option amongst many. I don't know. I mean, I think how does that pose to this? The idea that actually, I mean, vibe coding, it's best also for prototyping more so than it's going to change everything and we're all going to die and burn in a fiery hell of bad quality software.
I think that's right, and that's a far more articulate argument for my position than I've given. So thank you.
I'm voting for that.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, thank you. I'll have that. So, but I think just to emphasize that point, there are core skills in building software, not writing code, but building software that we mustn't forget. And one of them is decomposing problems, designing systems. That is a multidisciplinary skill that requires domain experts. It requires like business domain experts as well as domain experts in different technical disciplines. But also we have, as I said earlier, the understanding requirements, building empathy with users, knowing that is important, and all of the things you mentioned, like the disciplines that are still technical but not programming, like UI UX design or cybersecurity or DevOps. So all of these things have to come together. So yes, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, bang on. I mean, I think if by that definition, like what is software, and it's not just writing the code, there's a lot more to it. So by that definition, I have lost. I'd vote for the other side, but he didn't make it. So I mean, still take what you want from that.
Still a sum up to that.
Just to add to the point that you made as well, I think how many businesses manage that risk anyway around finance? Any startups running trying to get a mesh check, and I think it's a question of the quality of the people, the quality of the group, the quality of the relationships even in that business, and the risk management within it to properly warn when it's okay to rush and when actually we're going to trip up and we're going to all end up with bruised faces if we run, even if we get the next check. And that risk management, maybe can I chat GPT will help.
I mean, it's all been really fascinating. I think we're all learning so much in the room just by this discussion. And you know, when I think about, I heard a phrase 3 years ago, citizen developer. Who's heard this phrase before? Low code was meant to create the citizen developer. But actually, low code was just coding without syntax, but you still needed to problem solve. And you still needed to have business logic. And you still needed to understand the domain. So it's never really, and I think, you know, take your point a little bit further, it's never just been about pure typing code. You know, when we teach people to code at North Coders, we say at the very start of the course, you'll probably spend about maybe 30% of your week, maybe less, actually coding. The rest of it, you're solving problems, you're understanding, you're talking, you're peer reviewing. I think 30% probably quite high, actually. So and I think your point, Matt, about building software versus cutting code, you know, there's a huge difference between that. So all of this is, I think, these are the themes that are coming out today. Questions over here. We got 1, 2. Put your hands up so I can. 1, 2. Protect you. 3. Okay, 4.
Just a quick one from me. Is there a difference between vibe coding and prompt engineering, like true prompt engineering?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say prompt engineering isn't necessarily writing code. And that's manipulating an LLM to do certain things in a certain way. So I wouldn't put them in the same category personally. I thought you were going to say is the difference between vibe coding and AI assisted programming, which I thought might be a debate we'd have in terms of spectrum. But I wouldn't classify prompt engineering and vibe coding together. Matt?
Yeah, likewise, I wouldn't. Vibe coding, when you're vibe coding, you are using prompts, i.e. you're talking to the model to ask it to do something. Prompt engineering, you are trying to construct prompts for, it could be for any number of different use cases. Your prompts might be parameterized, for instance, as well. The other thing is that word engineering is important. And if you're doing prompt engineering, then you should also be measuring something. And nowadays, people more and more talk about evaluation, so ways to automatically measure the effectiveness of your prompts. So it's a very different set of tasks, I suppose, if that makes sense.
Cool, thank you. Over here.
Thank you. Sure. So I was wondering, like, with the current capabilities of the models available in the market, how do you rate as a percentage the reliability of the code generated by vibe coding to be in production level, like production ready? And as well as, do you think we are already reaching a plateau in terms of the capabilities of these models? Are they getting really that good, especially with the overhype of ChatGPT 5, well, AGI and all this up, and then it was a bit disappointing. And the fact that most of them code generated in GitHub now becoming AI generated, so it's like a vicious cycle, AI training AI at some point. So what do you think overall about this?
Can I just comment on the plateau, then I'm going to hand over to Tom, who I think will have more to say on this. But just on the plateau, I think that's avoidable. If we are reaching a plateau, it's going to be down to a lack of training data, which came up earlier, for instance, in the case of Terraform, because we're relying on benchmark data sets that are used to train these coding models, and they are limited in terms of how much data is available to them. You can filter out, you can somewhat filter out AI generated code and prevent that kind of death loop as well. But no, I don't think we're going to reach a plateau, because I think there's just so many dimensions that are just not well explored yet. That's my view on it.
Yeah, I'm not clever enough to talk technically about the plateau, although I thought you might be. But just from a commercial point of view, there's so much investment going into this, and the sort of global race between the US and China to build the best models. There's no way this is plateaued. I wouldn't put much money on that. So I think they're going to get better and better. Did you say overhype of ChatGPT 5? Yeah. I mean, I thought it was an improvement. I think it is an improvement. I don't know about specifically the measurements. I mean, there's definite metrics around these coding benchmarks that they have improved, and so that's quite quantifiable. I guess the bigger question is around the rest of it. So it's quantifiable over specific tasks, but then it's the rest of the architecture, I think, and context really important. I think as the models are able to take more context, or the prompts get better, and the ecosystem around it. So I think, Claude Code, Cursor, whatever, if they're prompted better or internally to say, do this thing, but make sure you've checked security, make sure you've checked for bugs. We can prompt that now. You can use these coding assistants in a more sophisticated way. I think the quote vibe coder isn't doing it in a sophisticated way, but I think the AI assisted programmer can and will.
Sorry.
Hi guys. So I'm curious, who's going to own and have access to highly skilled AI models? So like we were talking about heart surgery earlier, there's thousands of hospitals worldwide. Is every single hospital going to have their own AI model? Or is there going to be one company like Google that patents heart surgery, and all of a sudden there's just one model only for heart surgery? What do you think?
Yeah, I really like that question. We're big open source advocates, and I'm a big, Linux is my background, and open source is my passion really. And I would like to see, at the moment, I think that you've got the US building proprietary models, and they're fighting each other to build the best proprietary model. They're overlapping all the time. You've got the Chinese building open source models, quote open source. There's some bits they don't release, but there is an open source element to them, which means you can run and deploy them yourself. You can fine tune them for your own use case. And I personally put too much money on it, but I would like to believe that it will consolidate down to open source models that can be specialized for certain tasks. So a hospital can take, and the large language models at the moment, they're huge. They cost a shitload of money to train. Most people can't afford to train them. But if they're more specialized, they can be smaller and be more specialized in what they do. So I would like to think that there can be an open source foundation and the knowledge so organizations can have their own smaller language model or smaller models, AI models, whatever, to do their own thing. And they're not sending the data to third parties. They can run it internally and manage it themselves.
Unsurprisingly, I agree with all of that. I think the lesson from the history of software is that open source does win. We can see that in the internet, in the infrastructure that we have around us, and I think it's the same here with AI models. I just really hope that AI is not doing heart surgery, though.
And before we move on to the next question, I've got just a question that's related to the topic about lowering standards. Do either of you think there's ever going to be a world where you can get a certificate in vibe coding, like you can maybe in AWS or Azure or all kinds of other things? Probably nicked from the audience, by the way.
Okay, let me have a stab at that. I don't think there would be a certificate in vibe coding. I don't think it's necessary. I just think it would be like
to protect those engineering stuff.
Oh well, let me come to that. So vibe coding alone, no. I think that is like having a certificate in writing for loops or writing classes. It's just these things are just tools that we use as part of how we write software, and that's how I see it. But I think maybe it's more that educational programs and certifications in software engineering include how do I still maintain that engineering standards while also using these tools. It probably just gets incorporated into the curriculum for software engineering course or a degree, or a North Coders course, for example. That's my perspective on it. I think, having not put much thought into it. Tom?
I mean, the term vibe coding is provocative. I think Karpathy said it tongue in cheek when he came up with it. But I mean, there are vibe coding boot camps, and whether you get a certificate or not, I don't really know. But I think there are better ways to vibe code. So I don't think it's the worst idea in the world. I think to mitigate some of the things we talked about today, if you could vibe code better, you'd have less shit prototypes going into production. It'd just be slightly less shit.
Cool. David, you were next.
So, couple of thoughts. So first one, I guess, is that if vibe coding lowers the barrier to entry for people to kind of produce software, then more people are more likely to do that. And therefore, it is going to be a volume problem, as Neil said before, and mathematically, therefore, it is going to lower engineering standards because it's going to increase the probability of people accidentally or perhaps deliberately releasing buggy code onto the internet. So I think mathematically it just has to follow. The more interesting question for me, I think, is that to what extent is this just a snapshot of a moment in time? It's a reflection of the state of the models as they exist today. As several people have said, they are evolving very rapidly. But my question, I guess maybe for you, Matt, is there a fundamental limit as to how good they can get if they're based on probabilistic token generation technology behind LLM? Because unless you train it on every single possible problem that could exist in the world, how can you ever be sure that it's going to solve your problem correctly? If you can't solve your problem correctly, well, LLMs in principle can only get you so far before you need a completely different technology altogether to reintroduce engineering standards.
I love this question because there's a lot in it that I could try and tackle, but we'll probably be here all night. Let me start from the try and cover a couple of bits though. Firstly, I don't actually think it's valid to say that because these things are stochastic, they generate random text, therefore they can't solve every possible problem, because there are things emerge, emergent properties from complex systems that look random, but things emerge from them that are structured. Well, we know that. I could very much argue that humans are also a little bit stochastic, right? We clearly are. We are a little bit random, and yet we're able to solve engineering problems and build bridges and do all sorts of very clever things. So there's that. And you look at nature, you see random processes, but you see structure emerge from that. So I don't think it's, and we see that in large language models, right? That's almost the spooky thing about large language models, that behaviors emerge from them that you think, how on earth has that happened? Because the training data, we know the training data, we know how it generates, it's random. So how do we get this emergent behavior? How do we get, for example, reasoning from these things? It almost defies intuition, but it's because of emergent behavior from what is a random system at the base. So that's one thing, but that's not necessarily the point you're making, I think, which is that, is there an upper bound on how good these models can get at solving engineering problems? Yeah, maybe. I don't think we have a word for what it is that large language models are doing, because it's not thinking, but it's also not just generating stuff. It's something else that we don't have a word for, and I don't know how limited that is. But I don't know if, people talk about different model architectures, but I don't feel like that's a giant step forward. It's just a move to a different way of doing essentially the same thing. So I suppose it remains to be seen if there's an upper bound. I suspect there's probably an upper bound in some respects, but we probably find the ceiling is higher than we think it is because of that power of emergence. That's my intuition on it anyway.
You don't need my opinion on this.
Well, a question over here, and then after this we'll have one more question. So who wants the final question? Hands up, and you've got one. And then after you, think about one more to cover.
Hi guys. Firstly, really good debate. Really enjoyed it. But I think there's been far too much agreement, so I'm going to throw a cat amongst the pigeons and give you something to convince us all one way or the other. So I don't think there's any debate about the first part of the motion. I think it's democratizing software for more people who don't have that traditional background. But the second part, the lowering engineering standards, I've got kind of two different points of view, and I'd love to get your takes on both of them. The first is that if we're not as focused as engineers on the actual syntax, the syntax becomes secondary in terms of the actual language. And it just allows us to focus on the actual problem-solving part of what we do, building software. Is there an argument to be made there that even today with the existing models, we can focus on the actual core bit, which isn't the syntax, it's the problem solving. So that could raise engineering standards even today. The other part is, are these tools just going to make people lazy and just go, yeah, the vibes are feeling good, so I'm just going to ship it, and then that's lowering engineering standards. So I guess interesting, I think, for you guys to debate.
Okay. So I like how you're trying to provoke some arguments here, but I'm just going to answer your question with a question, which is, why do we actually care about engineering standards? I'm going to be really provocative about that. So why do we care about engineering standards, right? If we can build anything we want with text prompts, then who cares? What we do care about, the concerns people have raised in the audience, are about the security of data, which you could say is an engineering standard, but you could frame it as a requirement. You could say it's a requirement of this software that only authorized users can access the data, right? And we don't care how you get there. We just care that that's the case. And this is more of a declarative approach to things, a declarative way of thinking about things. So I'm not actually making the argument. I do care about engineering standards, and partly because I know that human beings still need to be able to work with these code bases. But I think that's precisely why we actually care about engineering standards, as opposed to a set of requirements and constraints that we expect our software to comply with. We care about standards because of people. I don't think that the use of AI coding tools or even vibe coding takes away from our ability to have engineering standards. I don't think it diminishes them. I can accept the probability argument that there's just more stuff out there, yes, but I don't think it inherently makes engineering standards worse. It just creates a new economy of software that we haven't ever faced before. But I think we need to think about why we care about engineering standards too. Like, be clear about that. What do you think, Tom?
To answer the first part of your question, when I first fire up code, I was absolutely blown away. I thought to myself, no one needs to write code ever again. This can do it all. I can prompt it any way I want. It can make things secure. It can fix any bugs. It can do everything. I'm not in that position now. I think, and I expect it to improve. Where we are at the moment, I don't think you can ignore this. And I think if you want to write something that's properly robust and production ready, I don't think you can afford to ignore the syntax. So I think that's this. So I don't think he's gone. The spectrum of vibe coding to AI-assisted programming. Vibe coding is, as Karpathy describes it, I'm not looking, keep going. What does it work? No, put the errors in, keep moving. The more sophisticated way, and I think everyone that writes code should be looking at this, because otherwise you're going to get left behind, is to use these AI-assisted tools to highlight the specific bits of the code you want to look at and use it as a pair programmer. Get it to help you accelerate what you're doing. So I think at the moment we can't even know the syntax if you want production-ready code.
Last question is Ian with fastest hand up first. What you both to start thinking about how you're going to sum up.
Or we have to sum up.
Thanks. I guess I want to come back to vibe coding, why it's taking off. And I was having this conversation actually at another event where someone said, if we had someone on our team who behaved like vibe coding behaved, as in doesn't even read the diffs, right? And somebody was providing that person to me for £850 a day, there's no way I'd use them. And so his argument was, it's just economics, right? It's dirt cheap. That's the only reason people are bothering about it. And the only reason it's hyped up on LinkedIn and everywhere is the companies who are providing these services are into their investment for billions. There's billions, and they're desperate to, oh my God, we've got to make some money because we've raised $4.5 billion and we've never turned a profit. So I just wonder if actually, engineering standards are not the primary concern driving vibe code. It's just economics. I just do this dirt cheap. And yeah, if I had to pay 150 quid a day, would you accept that quality?
Before you answer that question, I've got something to slightly add to that. Might be cheaper now, but how much are we eventually going to have to pay for vibe coding because of all this investment that's gone in and the drug that they're getting us hooked onto? But when they actually start, once we're completely hooked, ramping up those subscription costs beyond what it would cost to actually employ a human being to actually type it. That economics question. And there could be another clause in this motion. It's like, is it lowering engineering standards, but ultimately going to increase costs anyway?
Yeah, I think zooming right. I've had this conversation twice today. Somebody at lunch was saying, that they run a consultancy business. They were like, I'm not sure where I'm going to invest my money in terms of giving people AI assisted tools because we all know that they're running at a loss at the moment, right? They can't afford what we're paying for this stuff is not economically viable for these companies. So there's a huge race to make it cheap. I mean, Google, Claude Code came out, it was amazing, 20 quid a month, unbelievable, but it had a limit. Google came out with Gemini, CLI, for free with unlimited context. So they will do anything to get people hooked into their ecosystem because they know, and I think also they recognize that if they can get the developer market, then that's going to surface up to other users. They're going to be the primary users of that. So if Anthropic can get people into Claude Code, more people are going to use Claude, some with Gemini and OpenAI and all that kind of stuff. So absolutely right. Yeah, we're getting hooked on cheap crack at the moment. And the prices are going to rise. So yeah, we've got to be careful of it. What was the other bit of the question?
Well, as in engineering standards, so the big players, they're what's your secondary issue?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I watched a video from Anthropic of one of the developers on Claude Code, and it sounded amazing. All these ways you could use it. And I thought, okay, went back and thought I'll try some of these things, and they weren't that good. It's going to keep improving. We're going to keep getting sold this stuff. We're going to keep getting told how good it is. There is value in it. I don't think there's not no value in it. But again, I think that's why this is such a good debate to have, to put some pragmatic reality onto it.
Matt?
Nothing really to add to that one, actually. I don't think. It's fine.
Cool. Well, you should keep the microphone, Matt, because this is your 60-second sum up. You can go to 90. I'll give you 90 seconds.
So generous.
And then Tom will close the proceeding for final vote.
Thank you. So, thanks for listening, firstly. I think we clearly all strongly agree, violently agree, that vibe coding is an opportunity and AI-assisted coding is an opportunity for people to build things, people who have never been able to build things before. That's not in dispute. But what's in dispute is whether whether engineering standards are inherently lowered by virtue of people using these tools to build things, including people who would not have been building them before. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that the presence of these tools, the availability of these tools, inherently impact engineering standards. I think, if anything, it creates jobs for the actual engineers who will need to productionize this stuff further down the line, but it also forces us to rethink our relationship with people who are building software. We engineers have worked in a world where other engineers build software. We haven't quite prepared for a world where non-engineers build software. We haven't figured that out, but this still doesn't lower standards. It just means we need to think about it in a different way. I think also people creating prototypes aren't necessarily intending to do engineering. I don't think we should expect them to approach it as though they're doing engineering. And I think it's partly the job of tool vendors to help guide people in the right direction and educate and that kind of thing as well. I think that's all. I feel like I had something else, but my brain is very hazy right now. So I'm going to leave it there.
I told you he was clever. I like what Matt's done here. I think we come down to semantics, though, and maybe the grammar of how we've constructed this. Because I agree with you. Overall, I don't think engineering standards will be lowered if we do things in the right way. But my interpretation of this was that the vibe-coded solutions are lowering engineering standards. So it depends on how you interpret the motion. Put a comma in there or some brackets, I don't know. Your point was good though. I actually debated the first half as well with your argument. Like, if we define software as more than just writing code, it's not democratized it. So I think again, you can take that any way you want.
Vibe coding is democratizing coding as opposed to software. But as the person who put forward the motion, you also came up with the motion. So
I was cornered.
That's it. So I'm actually very surprised, Tom, you didn't wear a pair of sunglasses.
I nearly did.
But I have to say, and we need a round of applause for Tom, first of all. With that. I'd also like a round of applause for both their sock games. I mean, look at them socks. Unbelievable. Amazing. So a round of applause for the socks. And then we come on to the final vote. Who is the winner? Hold on. Gone too soon. That one. We've done the final say. Vote. There we go. Everyone gets the page without voting, without submitting, because we'll do that live on the next slide. Is everyone on? Anyone not on? Okay. For another 15 seconds. Build up the tension a little bit. Don't get mesmerized by those amazing socks.
The belt with Python. If you vote for me, I will give you socks.
Final say's been done. Come on, Matt. Right, everyone ready? I'll switch over to the... Right there. Right there. There we go. Go.
Oof, very well.
Do you get a vote on the... Do you get a vote? Do you get a vote?
Yep.
Yeah. Dual event, I'm having a event.
Oh, it's shifting. So the benchmark was 65-35. So currently Matt is winning the benchmark. He's changed some minds. We've only had 16 votes. A lot more people voted last time. Don't be shy.
Was this my coding, by the way?
It'll turn out Tom built it. And he's rigged it.
Okay. Is that it? Are we at the end of this? So, although Tom wrote the motion is passed, but the argument over the evening has been won by Matt. So basically, what we can say is everyone's a winner tonight. Thank you so much, Matt and Tom.